And you know what? Just what they feared took place. The Russians moved across their border, and they remain occupying part of Ukraine. That's the word of America we gave. And we're breaking that word. Why? For help with a political campaign? Pastor Taylor was exactly right. That's crazy. It's worse than crazy. It's repulsive. It's repugnant. It breaks our word. And to do it in the name of these corrupt investigations is also contrary to everything we espouse around the world. I used to be part of a commission in the House on democracy assistance, where we would meet with parliamentarians, and I know my Senate colleagues do much the same thing. And we would urge our colleagues to observe the rule of law, not to engage in political investigations and prosecutions. I don't know how we make that argument now. I don't know how we look our allies or these burgeoning democracies in the face, our fellow parliamentarians, and make that argument now. How do we make that argument now? Now, testimony indicated that Secretary Pompeo eventually carried that cable into the White House. But there's no evidence that those national security concerns that they don't want you to see were able to outweigh the president's personal interest in his getting foreign help in his re-election campaign. There's no evidence at all. Now we get to August 28th. Politico was the first to publicly report that President Trump had implemented a hold on nearly $400 million of U.S. military assistance to Ukraine that had been appropriated by Congress. Now that the worst-kept secret was public, Ukrainian officials immediately expressed their alarm, concern to their American counterparts. As witnesses explained, the Ukrainians had two serious concerns. One, of course, was the aid itself, which was vital to their ability to fight off Russia. But in addition, they were worried about the symbolism of the hold, that it signaled to Russia and Vladimir Putin that the United States was wavering in its support for Ukraine. Witnesses testified that this was a division that Russia could and would exploit to drive further wedge between the United States and Ukraine to its advantage. The second concern was likely why Ukrainian officials had wanted the hold to remain a secret in the first place. Because it would add to the negative impact to Ukraine if the hold itself became public. It's bad enough that the President of the United States put a hold on their aid. It was going to be far worse if it became public, as indeed it did. Andrei Yermak, the same Zelensky aide, sent Ambassador Volker a link to the Politico story, and then texted, "Need to talk with you." Other Ukrainian officials also expressed concerns to Ambassador Volker that the Ukrainian government was being singled out and penalized for some reason. Well, what do we think that reason was? Why were they being singled out? Why was that country being singled out? That was the one country that this president could lever for help against an opponent he feared. That's why Ukraine was being singled out. On August 29th, Yermak also contacted Ambassador Taylor. Yermak said the Ukrainians were very concerned about the hold on military assistance. He said that he and other Ukrainian officials would be willing to travel to Washington to explain to U.S. officials the importance of this assistance. Ambassador Taylor, who was on the ground in Ukraine, explained the Ukrainian viewpoint and, frankly, their desperation.
In September, the Minister of Defense, for example, came to me, I would use the word desperate, to figure out why the assistance was being held. He thought that perhaps if he went to Washington to talk to you, to talk to the Secretary of Defense, to talk to the President, he would be able to find out and reassure, provide whatever answer was necessary to have that assistance released.
Without any official explanation for the hold, American officials could provide little reassurance to their Ukrainian counterparts. It has been publicly reported that President Trump, Secretary Esper, and Secretary Pompeo met in late August and that they all implored the president to release the aid. but President Trump continued to refuse to release the aid. As of August 30th, the president was clearly directing OMB to continue the hold on security assistance. In documents reviewed by Just Security but withheld from the Congress by OMB on the president's instructions, OMB official Michael Duffy emailed DOD Controller Elaine McCusker that there is, quote, clear direction from POTUS to continue the hold. So here we are, August 30th. A month after that July 25th call, aid still being withheld. Ukrainians still holding on, still not willing to capitulate, not willing to violate Zelensky's whole campaign pledge about not engaging in corrupt investigations. That same day, August 30th, Republican Senator Ron Johnson spoke with Ambassador Sondland to express his concern about President Trump's decision to withhold military assistance to Ukraine. Senator Johnson described that call in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. According to Senator Johnson, Ambassador Sondland told him that if Ukraine would commit to, quote, get to the bottom of what happened in 2016, if President Trump has that confidence, then he'll release the military spending. Senator Johnson added, at that suggestion, I winced. My reaction was, oh God, I don't want to see those two things combined. The next day, August 31st, Senator Johnson spoke by phone with President Trump regarding the decision to withhold aid to Ukraine. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump denied the quid pro quo that Senator Johnson had learned of from Ambassador Sondland. At the same time, however, President Trump refused to authorize Senator Johnson to tell Ukrainian officials on his upcoming trip to Kyiv that the aid would be forthcoming. The message that Ambassador Sondland communicated to Senator Johnson mirrored that used by President Trump during the July 25th call with President Zelensky, in which President Trump twice asked the Ukrainian leader to get to the bottom of it, including in connection to an investigation into the debunked conspiracy theory of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election. It also mirrored the language of the text message that Ambassador Volker sent to President Zelensky's aide just before the July 25th call. Indeed, despite the president's self-serving denials, the message was clear. President Trump wanted the investigations, and he would withhold not one, but two acts vested in him by the power of his office in order to get them. Now begins September. September 1st. The president was supposed to go to Warsaw, as we know, but doesn't go to Warsaw. Mike Pence goes to Warsaw. Jennifer Williams, special advisor to the vice president for Europe and Russia, learned of the change in the president's travel plans on August 29th. The vice president's national security advisor asked at the request of Vice President Pence for an update on the status of the security assistance that had just been publicly revealed in Politico and would be a critical issue during the bilateral meeting between the vice president and President Zelensky in Warsaw. The delegation arrives in Warsaw, gathers in a hotel room to brief Vice President Pence before he met with the Ukrainian president. National Security Advisor Bolton led the meeting. Advisors in the room, quote, agreed on the need to get a final decision on security assistance as soon as possible so that it could be implemented before the end of the year. But Vice President Pence did not have authority from the president to release the aid. Ambassador Sondland also attended that briefing. At the end of it, he expressed concern directly to Vice President Pence about the security assistance being held until the Ukrainians announced the very same politically motivated investigations at the heart of this scheme. Now, you mentioned that you also had a conversation with Vice President Pence before his meeting with President Zelensky in Warsaw, and that you raised the concern you had as well that the security assistance was being withheld because of the president's desire to get a commitment from Zelensky to pursue these political investigations. What did you say to the vice president?
I was in a briefing with several people, and I just spoke up and I said, it appears that everything is stalled until this statement gets made. something that words to that effect, and that's what I believe to be the case based on the work that the three of us have been doing, Volker, Perry, and myself. And the vice president nodded like, he heard what I said, and that was pretty much it, as I recall.
Everyone was in the loop. Ambassador Sondland testified that Vice President Pence was neither surprised nor dismayed by the description of this quid pro quo. At the beginning of the bilateral meeting between President Zelensky and Vice President Pence, as expected, the first question from President Zelensky related to the status of the security assistance. As Vice President Pence's aide, Jennifer Williams, testified, President Zelensky explained that just equally with the financial and physical value of the assistance, that it was the symbolic nature of that assistance that really was the show of U.S. support for Ukraine and for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Later that day, Vice President Pence spoke to the President about his meeting with President Zelensky. But the hold on security assistance remained in place well after Vice President Pence returned from Warsaw. And after the meeting, the Warsaw meeting with Vice President Pence, Ambassador Sondland quickly pulled aside Andrei Yermak, Zelensky's top aide, and informed him that the aid would not be forthcoming until Ukraine publicly announced the two investigations that President Trump wanted. So here we are, after the meeting, right after the meeting, they're still in Warsaw, and Zelensky pulls aside his Ukrainian counterpart, Yermak, and explains the aid is not coming until the investigations are announced.
Based on my previous communication with Secretary Pompeo, I felt comfortable sharing my concerns with Mr. Yermak. It was a very, very brief pull-aside conversation that happened within a few seconds. I told Mr. Yermak that I believed that the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine took some kind of action on the public statement that we had been discussing for many weeks.
And let's let that sink in for a minute, too. You've heard my colleagues at the other table say, Ukrainians felt no pressure. There's no evidence they felt any pressure. Of course, we've already had
Ain't no pressure. That's bullshit.
about how they did feel pressure.